Okay, I think we're going to get started here. People come in as well. My name is Kara Cook. I'm a member of the TCRG Program Committee, and I want to welcome you today. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. We have two presenters today to talk about waste management and recycling in the Twin Cities area. And so they're going to take turns for doing their presentation. We'll do the first one, then we'll wait. We'll have questions after that presentation, so they're fresh in your mind. And then we will go to the next presentation, and then if there's have questions for that, and then there's follow-ups if we have time, we'll go from there. So our first presenter is Dr. Lawrence Baker, and he is a research professor at the Department of Bioproducts and Biosystems Engineering at the University of Minnesota. His research focuses on hybrid education and environmental engineering and ecology, and with a focus on human ecosystems in cities and farms. Some of his recent work is focused on the movement of nutrients through households. And particular interest for him is how urban regions transition from one state to another in like a closed loop system. So he'll be doing the first presentation up here. And then our next presenter is Jane Vanderpool. And Jane is a management analyst at Dakota County. She originally worked there at Dakota County as a communications director, but then has switched to an analyst role, which gives her an opportunity to work with demographic and socioeconomic data, program evaluation, policy research, and analysis and process improvement. Previous to her work at the county, she worked for 12 years at the Minnesota House of Representatives in communication and policy research roles. At two Twin Cities newspapers and for Twin Cities Public Television. So Jane has an undergraduate degree in journalism and also a master's in public administration. And her presentation will be on residential recycling rates. So I will turn it over to Professor Baker. Go from there.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a research project that we started last year. This is on the topic of closing the loop in organic waste, or sometimes we call it re-engineering the organic waste streams in the Twin Cities. The general thrust of this is we're not recycling much of our organic waste, or at least not anywhere near enough as we could. And that there's two real values here. One is to reduce the landfill tipping fees and the environmental impacts and all that. And the second is that some of these products that we're throwing out, these organic things, are really quite valuable. And that value can be recognized. The team here, this is a very interdisciplinary team. Jacqueline and Sarah Hughes are both political scientists. They're actually at the University of Toronto. Daniel Nagorski just got his PhD here, is actually working in the state of Washington. We do a lot of conference calls and Skype and everything else. Carl Rosen is a soil scientist and agronomist. Roger Rowan is a mechanical engineer. Jennifer's an ecologist. Jerry Sershin is a swine nutritionist, and Pedro works with him. He's a postdoc with Jerry. And this is funded by a thing called MnDrive. It's an allotment of money, which I don't know exactly how much, probably 10 million or so, that goes to the university to try to create ways to develop products that then will translate into jobs and such. This is a little bit different than some of them, and which is both good and bad, I guess. But, so, what were the general questions? How could we re-engineer the flow of waste to remove, to move from a flow-through system to a closed-loop system for organic waste? And it's not just a technology problem, it's not just an economics problem, really it's a social and political system that has to change along the way. And one of the virtues of our project is we are doing all that. This talk is going to shift a little bit on the latter side, given what I perceive to be the backgrounds and interests of people who would be attending that. This is our current organic waste system. We import from the outside animal food into Minnesota and fertilizer. That's converted. Some of the manure comes back. The food waste, much of it, almost all of the household food waste goes into landfills. Some of this is diverted, mostly commercial. I'm sorry, oh, I'm sorry, it's incinerated, yeah. It's incinerated, I haven't looked at the slide yet. It ends up as ash, which is then thrown into a landfill, or the sewage ends up going this direction, gets concentrated as biosolids and then incinerated, or much of it, not all of it, as ash, which also goes to a landfill. And what we're looking at is closing this loop In theory, you'd have no new inputs, but there probably still would be fertilizer and such coming in. You'll never close it 100%. This arrow's in the wrong direction. I missed an arrow here. You get the food. You're getting now food going to feed and feeding the animals. You would still have some residue going here and possibly coming back. And the sewage, again, going either directly or via ash coming back into the farmland. That's sort of an idealized image. It will probably never work quite like that, but that's the direction we want to head. I'm going to start with biosolids. You may or very likely may not know anything about sewage treatment, but basically all the sewage goes into a sewer and ends up going to waste treatment. Basically anything that can be taken up by bacteria becomes biosolids. It would look, if it was straight biosolids coming out of the pump, it would be like gooey mud. It would smell a little bit worse than that. It needs to get treated a little bit and dried, and there's actually a lot you can do with it. Historically, it has been recycled in the very old days. In the very old days, we recycled all of it. In Minnesota, only about 20% is land applied for agriculture. A good part of it is landfill or incinerated, and this is mostly Met Council, incinerated at the Metro plant and then landfill. So it's really 75% of it goes out of the system. It's kind of a waste. It has a lot of nutrients. The ash, we estimated, could supply phosphorus fertilizer to farms for about a 50-mile radius or so. A value of $15 million. It's a consistent supply, and it's logistically feasible, we think. The trick here is to either dry or ash. You can't ship wet sludge. It's just too heavy. Up till now, it's generally been, I've heard over and over again at various venues, that you can't do anything with sewage ash when you incinerate the ash and get it to a dry powder because the phosphorus isn't available and or there are too many metals. Historically, there were too many metals before the Clean Water Act, and we got industrial waste out of sewage. But these days, it's really not that bad. The metals are if you count it as fertilizer and compare it with commercial fertilizer, many of the metal levels are actually lower than commercial fertilizer. So Carl Rosen, our guy, did an experiment with dried ash in a greenhouse. This is funded by Met Council directly. And here's the first slide. They're adding 100 pounds of B2O5 per acre. Typical fertilization rate. Here's the growing with the ash, and here's growing with the control. It's a little bit better with the ash, but the next one is a little bit better. Here's the fertilizer, regular commercial fertilizer, all at the same phosphorus application rate, so it's scaled. Here's the ash, here's the dried biosolids, and here's the struvite, which is it's sort of the holy grail that some people are trying to get, where you precipitate the phosphorus out directly. It's very hard to do. There are very few commercial plants. But you can see the ash, first of all, it doesn't look very toxic, and second, it grows just fine. And you can show that the phosphorus actually goes into the lettuce leaves. Now, we need to do a lot more work on this, but right now, as a minimum, we can say, well, it doesn't kill the plant, and the plant is growing, and it looks very promising for using dried ash. Ash. This is dried biosolids, not ash. This one's ash. Okay. Second, we're going to look at food waste. Waste, or at least a huge amount of nutrients, are lost per day. We consume about 2,031 calories per day. This is what they get from plate survey studies. The loss at the retail and consumer level is 1,250 calories per day. This is from the Economic Research Service of the USDA. We lose half as many calories as we eat. Okay, that's almost a sin. The cost of that food loss, if you were to have used that food properly in the first place, is about $2.8 billion. So it's a lot of wasted money. You can also feed about a third of Minnesota's hogs with this, based on the calorie content of the stuff. This may look like garbage to you, but it's a feast for these guys. Of course, When we talk about feeding here, we're not talking about wet flopping. There's a little bit of that going on, where goods are or food is put into basically a truck that has a heater. It gets sterilized and gets fed directly. That you'll never have a very large amount of demand for that. Hormel would never buy those hogs. They want what we're envisioning instead. This stuff gets dried, sterilized, powdered, and then sold as a feedstock that would then be blended with other feedstocks: corn, distiller's grain, cottonseed. There's about 20 different things that are blended together. Today's hog farmer doesn't know what he's getting. He gets like you go out and buy dog food. He goes out and buys hog food, and it's designed to meet the requirements for each age of the hog. They're computer fed and everything else. This is not the old days of wet flopping hogs. So we're talking about a dry feedstock that would be, some firm like Purina or somebody would pick up and use, just like the way they purchase other things, depending on price and nutrient quality and stuff like that. These hogs have a much better diet than we do in terms of having everything carefully controlled in the right quantities. So we have been over the past year analyzing stuff. This illustration is Lund Byerly food waste. We've also done one of the cafeterias on campus. We've also done sort of mixed organics from the transfer station. This has a lot of other stuff in it other than food. And we're looking at other things. And what we're doing, we're splitting the samples. We're looking at for animal feed. We're looking at nutrient contents to see just how valuable this might be. And once we do this, we can pretty much tell what the market price is going to be. I can't, Jerry. We're also converting it to biofuels. I had a nice table with all kinds of, how much various types of ingredients could be gotten off of biofuels. I'm not going to talk about that. And the question is, I'll show you something. What's the highest and best use of these wastes? Not just food, but other related kinds of things. This is the way we do our biofuels production. You have an organic substrate, food, whatever. You can produce gas, liquid fuel, and a char. And you do this in a microwave oven. It comes the stuff, you burn the heck out of it, and it comes up here. You distill it. Things that come out at the bottom are liquids. Things that are less volatile go out the top. They're cooled. They distill again into a second distillation vehicle, and then again. And what comes out at the end is gas. Okay, so that's basically natural gas, sort of. So what I'm going to show you, I was going to show you some numbers and stuff, but I realize that this makes absolutely no sense. This is what we get right here. It's a biofuel. I'll pass it around. Don't drop it. I don't know exactly what's in here. The graduate students who did this, it's certainly not drinkable. So, but there's another nicer one. I was hoping to get that. That's nice and clear. It's sitting on the desk of Larry Rodacki at Met Council at the wastewater treatment plant. This beautiful clear thing. Anyway, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Roger Ruin, our mechanical engineer, is doing this again on many samples, trying to figure out what are the best products, how do you adjust this to get gas or certain fuels that you want based on the distillation process.
So I'm assuming the gas is actually used, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a heating product. This is some of the things that we're analyzing for various nutrients. Again, Byerly's deli, Byerly's produce, source-separated organics. I don't know if we've actually collected the sample yet. I know we are in the process of planning with Minneapolis. I'm a few weeks behind here. Here's the mixed organic waste at the Brooklyn Park transfer station. Here's the dining hall waste. Which of these can become food feedstock, and at what value? We can certainly use them for feedstock. The question is at what value, and are there any contaminants in them and things like that. Jerry Sherson is our internationally known swine nutritionist here with his pig, and he and his postdocs and graduate students are working on that. I'll just give you one quick example. Here's the supermarket waste, here's the residence hall, here's the transfer station, and here's traditional foods, corn and soybean meal. I just want to show 2 or 3 lines. Here's the calories, 4,800 calories per kilogram, 4,300 for the residence hall, quite a bit less for the transfer station. And here's corn. This stuff does better than corn in terms of metabolizable energy. In fact, when I first showed Jerry a paper that there's like one paper on this. Before we started this project, about 2 years, 3 years ago, he looked at it and go, oh my God, this is great hog food. You know, he didn't realize that. And it's better than soybean in a calorie standpoint. On a protein standpoint, it's any of these are better than corn, although soybean kind of beats out everything here. And fairly high in phosphorus. These are the three most the three things that give real value in terms of the cost of feed. So these are like the three most important. There's lots of other things that have to be considered here. We're also using some existing data, although amazingly, it's amazing how little data there is on food waste from specific sources, and even less, very, very little, on the actual composition in terms of nutrients and all that in food. For one thing, it's very hard to do those studies. They're called container studies. You actually have to get in there and sort out all the crap and decide what's food and what's paper. And unfortunately, not enough of those get done, especially as we move more toward wanting to recycle things. But just very quickly, from a California study that was done in 2006, here's the total amount of waste, the big bars for different kinds of restaurants and stores and stuff. Just to point out, here food stores, here's the amount disposed per employee. So if you knew the number of employees, you could map this out. I'm going to do that in a minute. But note that very little of that is diverted, maybe a third here is diverted. And look here, fast food and full service restaurants feel very little diverted here. In Minnesota, we actually don't know that very well because it's not tracked very well in the restaurants. We know that very little is recycled from the household.
Are you including food rescue in diversion?
What?
Food rescue, or are you including food rescue in
Oh boy, I can't remember this. This is a 2-year-old slide.
Sure.
I can't remember, but not a huge amount of diversion at that point in terms of the overall. Although I will say that is one very important thing that we're not looking at. The study that was supposed to do that didn't get funded. I was annoyed by that. But it's not bright and shiny. And now we're starting to map this out. These are locations of all the major grocery stores, and these represent the number of calories that per store, or kilocalories per store. We need this kind of information because we'll eventually, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to learn how to reroute things, where to put transfer stations that might process or sort of pre-process some of this stuff and all that. So this is the direction we're going. Jennifer Schmidt at INE, the Institute of Environment, is doing this work. Social and political considerations, Sarah Hughes at the University of Toronto is leading this with her graduate student. We did a survey of Minneapolis's what we call trial or whatever, SSO, Source Separated Organics program. This is Kelly Kish, who's doing a lot of coordination in this, and Minneapolis is now doing Source Separated Organics. So it's food, paper towels, and coffee grounds, and a few things like that. So that's the trial, the pilot project has been going on long enough. We got 350 responses from participants and non-participants. The survey itself, you're welcome to use it. It's got one time to develop it. It's on our website. Feel free. And we did policy actor interviews, which I'm not going to talk about very much, but I thought you might be interested in some of the attitudes toward organic cycling from the survey. The green is the participants. The reddish is non-participants. So these are people who did not participate. They participated in the survey, but they did not participate in the household source separated organics program. And this is voluntary. So this goes from disagree to agree. And the attitudes, the bottom line here is that as people participate, the barriers break down. They realize the things that they thought were going to happen don't happen. And this demonstrates it fairly quantitatively. I apologize a little bit on the slide. This was made about 3 days after the survey, the last survey results were collected, because our conference was coming up in June 2nd, and I haven't done anything with this. Sarah's been away for the summer and stuff, so we'll improve these slides a little bit. But participants found that it was cost efficient, more so than the non-participants. The participants said it was easy to do compared to the non-participants. So good to do and easy to do, even a bigger difference. Many barriers, participants said no, not so many, but non-participants said more. Need to know what to do. Know what to do. The participants did because, of course, they were doing it. These guys weren't, and so forth. I'll show you one more slide. The concerns. This even shows up more, and I'll just talk about some of these. It's going to smell. Participants way up here, and non-participants not absent noticeably, but not as high. It takes up space. Again, non-participants thought it was going to be much worse. It is going to cleanliness is going to be a problem. Again, participants thought it was much worse than people who were actually participating, and all the way through the cost, the pests, outdoors, which means in your bin, they thought it was going to be very high. So when people do it, they find that there's much less obstacles than people who don't do it. Willingness to pay, participants $2, non-participants even $1.75. Participants are largely middle-aged. It's a bit surprising. That's when you're, the Hasselback of kids and everything else is going on. You'd think older people would do it more. But no, that's not true. The other group, these are two things I think that are very important. People do it more, recycle more if they had free indoor bins. It's hard to pick out the right composting bin for your inside the household. Outside, it's provided. And if the waste bill were lowered, which eventually it could be, I suppose. Both of them look toward the city website and mailers for information. So what's going to happen, I think, or hope, what Kelly tells us is, they want to start using this information about education to tell people just this, that no, this isn't going to be as bad as what you might have thought. And also they might look toward improving the process a little bit. We're still fairly new at this. Even nationwide, unless you're in California, we're fairly new at this. In summary, there are multiple benefits to reengineering. Decreasing cost of disposal, I haven't really talked about that very much, but even just to dump it is about $50 a ton, and not including the transportation cost. It drives up over 100 sometimes. You can generate value from the products. We're really certain of that. Now, we don't know that it's going to be ultimately cost effective, but we do know that you can make a lot of sellable products out of this stuff. Creating knowledge will create value. Right now, if I were to line up a bunch of dried food waste products and told a farina that, well, you want these? Hell no, I don't want these. Well, this one's worth, whatever, $100 a ton or whatever, and now they can, okay, let me think about that. Let me see what cottonseed selling for. Let me see what corn selling for. What do we need in the mix? And if your product doesn't have any contaminants that can be produced, and you know the value of it, you create a momentum in doing that. Just you create transparency, which creates momentum. We are going to have to modify the waste infrastructure. In the policy actor interviews, one of the biggest points, just about everybody said the disorganized or unorganized, whatever you call it, collection of garbage makes it very, very difficult to organize your collection of garbage. So you have things going in the same direction and all that. That is going to slowly change. I think it was the Bluefin that instead of every household getting their own, picking their own, they took the same people, the same collectors, haulers, and they divided it. Zoned it, yeah. You get this zone, you get this zone. So now you have one truck. And now you can start to do more things like ask that truck, hey, collect the source separated stuff on Wednesdays and the other stuff on Monday, or have two trucks or something. But you can't get there the way it is now, or not very easily anyway, to a large extent. And finally, it is really the social and political system as much as the technical stuff. We can provide all the technical information we need on the heating value of fuels and the nutrient content of waste, but it has to get into the social and political system. Our technical advisory group, I didn't want to pull the names down, but let me see if I can remember. It includes Met Council, City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County has been very helpful, Hyman's particularly. The Minnesota Technical MINTAP, Minnesota Technical Advisory Program, MPCA, and I'm forgetting people, but there's a dozen people who have been guiding and shaping the way this is going along. I've always found that to be very helpful. And this is our website. You can go there and get the survey. You can see I ran out of space, so you actually can't see my presentation. I was trying to load it up. I realized I hadn't done that. But I can send you a copy if you want. And kind of what the goals of the project are and things like that. We are very much in a mode because this thing is, the whole mid-drive program is driven towards short-term products that get out and sell something. Like one guy's doing he's got a little electrode type of thing. He puts in builds into a milk carton that tells you when your milk's going bad, so you don't throw it away before it's going bad. Boom, that's a patent that's out the door. Okay, next. And here we got this problem. Okay, we're trying to re-engineer the entire waste system. You can't do that anymore. So our funding got cut back, not because we're doing anything wrong, but just because we hadn't sold anything, produced anything commercial yet. So we are very actively looking for new funding here on probably not the whole package, but various parts of it. So, and that's it. Something time. Barely. So I'll take a question or two now, and then we're going to.
I have a question about the hog feed stuff. So I know like Reconserve down in Roosevelt, the infrastructure and that with bakery goods and things like that. I think that you were saying potentially to do that with like produce and stuff as well.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
So for calories in for drying versus calories out for feed, is the drying of wet produce a net benefit in that regard? Because I mean, with the materials, it makes sense because you don't have evaporating water. But when you're drying out apples and sloppy peaches, it seems like it might be.
We use our biofuels.
Okay.
We don't know. We actually have an kind of an entrepreneur, a waste entrepreneur, who's actually going to produce some of this stuff on a semi-commercial basis. I think we're looking at a couple 100 pounds. And we're trying to get money to do a feeding trial on hogs. Okay. And so in the course of that, we'll learn how much energy does that take. But that is, Reconserve does get some wetter stuff that they don't particularly care for. They do it because they're also sending tons of dry material. So it's kind of a, customer service type of thing. They both got to kill them on cost. I mean, they're doing wet sludges.
Right. Well, I know like they get ice cream sometimes and weird stuff like that. So
feed that directly to a hog.
Okay, thanks.
But those are the kinds of issues that we need to deal with.
I was at WasteCon a couple weeks ago, and there's a company there that had a product, I think it's called Food Report. But essentially what they're doing, this model, they're taking food waste, packaged and unpackaged. They're running it through not like an Enders type scalper, but a press, squeezing all the food waste, and then they're producing an animal feed supplement, a dry product. I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is not unknown. I mean, Reconserve is doing this kind of thing, and other people are doing it around the country. The question isn't the technology. I mean, we know, other places have been doing this for years and such. The question is, donuts, yeah, it's easy. There's value. As you move down the food chain, it's mixed. I mean, you have deli waste; they're quite high in calories. But then you move down to produce and other things, and it starts to get lower. And the question is, where's the break-even point, and under what conditions? So this stuff is happening. A lot of it is happening. It's not overly transparent. Like it's very hard to know what fraction of commercial waste are being recycled because it kind of goes outside the waste system. It doesn't go through a transfer system. It goes directly. The guy pulled up and said, "Hey, I see you having garbage out there. We'll haul it away for you." And there's really no record of it. Now I think that's changing. I think MBTA has made tighter record keeping. We don't know. But many people, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. Well, what I think the role of the university is at the kind of the front end, not the commercial, to figure out how much it costs to drive, but to figure out, are these feeds, they're not going to invest the money probably that we've invested to try to go out and get stuff out of the garbage can, and figure out what the nutrient content is, and look at the variability, and figure out whether there's, any contamination, and how reliable that's going to be. We're at the front end of this. And then people like David, I just forgot his last name, the guy who's sort of an entrepreneur, setting up in some warehouse around here, a little dryer, and he'll figure out that stuff. We want him to make money. We don't want to. We have no motivation to reach a commercial stage. The other thing that we do well is the interdisciplinary part. You know, we can connect scientists in different arenas to work with this stuff to get a bigger picture. That's something a commercial place isn't going to do. So we want to jumpstart the commercialization project aspect if we can. We don't want to do it. That's not our job.
Okay. Thanks. Move on to our next presentation, James from Dakota County, and talk about recycling, right?
Yeah.
Will you switch to question? And then if you come up with other questions about Dr. Baker's presentation, if we have time at the end, we'll switch to those after James finishes hers.
Good afternoon. I'm Jane Vanderpool. I work for Dakota County for the Office of Performance and Analysis. We changed our name, but not our acronym.
Oh, yeah. Oh, coffee.
So unlike Professor Baker, I'm not a scientist. I'm a management analyst. And what we do with the Office of Performance and Analysis in Dakota County anyway is we sort of think of ourselves as an in-house consulting group. There are 6 of us, and we do a wide range of stuff that is intended to make the county more efficient and to use the limited resources that we have more efficiently. So we do policy analysis, program evaluation, outcome measures, process improvements, research, that kind of thing. This presentation stems from a project that we were asked to do a couple of years ago, which involved figuring out of the money that passes through Dakota County from the state of Minnesota, which happens in every county in the state. It's called the Community Grants Program. With the money that we get from the county, from the state, and then give to cities and townships, the purpose of the money is to find ways to increase recycling. And I mean, that's basically they call it a lot of different things, but essentially that is its core. Our job was to figure out who's doing the best job of that, and the goal, of course, is so that we can replicate what appears to be effective somewhere else. And what we found was there are lots of performance metrics that are required from the cities that have to get reported to Dakota County. But essentially what you're talking about is educating consumers, hoping for consumer change, and then trying to figure out a way to see that in the data. And the piece that was missing was, and I'm sure anybody in the room has ever dealt with trying to get people to change their behavior. It's not a quick or easy thing, and it's a little squishy. It's hard to really figure out, is it going to work or not. So we wanted data at the city level that was essentially very specific about what happens to the recycling rate over the period of time, depending on what they're doing. It doesn't exist. We couldn't get it. So instead, we did a survey. So that's the heart of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to give you. I'm happy that our presentations don't overlap too terribly much. But I wanted to spend at least a couple of minutes talking a little bit about how the recycling system in the state of Minnesota works. So it basically starts with PCA developed the State Pollution Control Agency, which absorbed a former agency that used to do this stuff many years ago. They developed statewide policy. Counties have the responsibility for, kind of doing it where the rubber hits the road. They administer policy, regulate recycling and waste reduction activities, supported by lots of state funding. And depending on what county you're in, you might be paying a waste surcharge. The county might be charging directly tipping fees, which means when the trash gets dumped or recycling gets dumped, the hauler has to pay a fee. Counties also do long-range planning, and the tools that they have at their disposal for the regulation part have to do with things like county or city ordinances, licensing of haulers, permitting haulers, and in the metro area, at least, most of the haulers these days are in the private sector, not the public sector. Also, in the metro area, 6 of 7 counties participate in the Solid Waste Management Coordinating Board. I'm told don't call it Swim Club anymore, but that's what everybody calls it because it focuses on policy and outreach. So state law does not say if you live in a house, you got to recycle. It says you live in a house, somebody comes and picks up your garbage, they need to make sure you have the ability to, or the opportunity to recycle. Starting in 2016, though, there's a new state law that's going to take effect, which says businesses, most businesses, unless they only produce a teeny amount of waste, are going to have to recycle, which is different from their current situation, which is they could, if they wanted to, if they worked that out with their hauler. In the metro area, most cities now have curbside service, meaning they don't have to, you don't have to pick up your, if you live in a rural part of Minnesota, or I suppose anywhere else, you probably don't have curbside service, meaning the hauler comes to you. You have to pick up your stuff and haul it somewhere else, just like almost all of us do, I imagine, for the household hazardous waste system is built on that kind of a model. In the metro area, almost everybody has curbside service, and in Dakota County, the whole county, including the townships, are now single source recycling, which means you dump everything in one bin, you don't have to separate it anymore. So in Dakota County, customers, I'm a good example of this, could have 3 fairly large, they're this high, they're this wide, in your garage or on the side of your garage or wherever you can find space to put them. One's for recycling, one's for trash, meaning everything else you throw away that's not hazardous waste, and one's for yard waste, because state law says you can't mix yard waste in your trash. So the professor talked a little bit about food waste, which the industry calls organic, and trying to figure out ways to recycle that. And we found when we did our survey that there's a fair amount of resistance. Even though people say, yep, that's the thing that makes sense because that's what they're used to and it works for this other stuff, there is a fair amount of resistance to adding another big bin in your garage or wherever it is that you have to make space for it. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Talked already about recycling services are almost all private sector. So a fairly new state law, I don't know if it's law or a goal. Is there anybody here from PCA? Yay, subject matter experts. So is it a law or was it just a goal? Not just a goal.
It's codified in statute.
Okay, so they're ratcheting up recycling for good reasons, because we're all running out of landfill space and there's a better way to do it. By 2030, the goal is 75% of everything that gets dumped in the trash is not going to get dumped in the trash because it's going to get recycled. Recycling services by law have to be, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, it's been a while since I looked at it.
Organic. So it's not just the traditional recyclables, so that does include organic.
Right, but they have to at least do the 4 big things, right? Plastics, metal, glass, and paper. Is that correct?
Do 3 broad materials.
3 of the 4, okay. So the way it works is you put your bin out every week or 2. In Dakota County, you could pretty much only do it every 2 weeks, although I have 2 of our 22 haulers that actually do it on a weekly basis. But most of them do it every other week. You put it on the out on at the end of your driveway, and a separate truck, not the trash truck, but a different truck comes along from your hauler, picks it up, takes it to a sorting facility where it all gets sorted out and hopefully gets bundled, and there are markets available for the items that get picked up. That, with the economy going in the tank and the technology changing, that is an ever-changing target, and it affects haulers' willingness to pick up stuff or to expand their list of what stuff they'll pick up. I talked already about, in 2016, another really big change that's happening in the waste hauling business is businesses are going to have to start participating in recycling as well. Another challenge, at least for us, in trying to increase the recycling rate is lots of people live in multi-housing, which means they're not in a single-family home. And those are considered to be, I don't know if this is by law or just by practice, they're considered to be commercial as opposed to residential accounts. So recycling doesn't have to be offered to them until 2016 in the same way that it is to residences. And so because that's a more mobile population and every hauler has a little different rule about what they'll pick up, it's harder to get people who are living, is our finding anyway, it's harder to get people who live in multifamily housing to participate in high rates of recycling because it's more of a pain for them to do it, and they're not very well informed usually about how to do it, how not to do it, and what the hauler will accept or won't accept. We also know that too much of our waste should not be in the trash. Too much of our recycling should not be in the trash at all. So in 2014, the total amount of waste that was generated countywide in Dakota County from homes, from businesses, from institutions, from everything, equated to about 2,500 pounds per capita. and you match that up with the professor's statistic about the number of pounds of food that we're wasting every day. We collected about 500,000 tons of waste, and more than half of that was either recycled or composted. But we also know from doing waste sorts that of the little bit less than half of what's left over, which goes in the garbage bin, an awful lot of that is recyclable, but it doesn't happen for a whole lot of different reasons. A PCA waste sort study, the sites for one of which was in Dakota County, found a couple of years ago that about a third of that is food waste, about 25% of it is paper, and a bunch of it is plastic, all of which can be recycled, although right now there's not an organized collection system yet for organics or food waste. We also have, I don't know how this happened, but we have, as part of our solid waste management ordinance, a requirement that if you're a hauler and you pick up somebody's recycling, you can't then, you can't then stick it back into the trash again. That's against the law. There's a state law. Well, our ordinance follows state law. Probably a good thing, right? This is what our traditional, meaning not composting, not yard waste, not organics, recycling rate is. So this is traditional items. You can see that until last year, we're coming pretty close to the 2020 target, and the 2030 target, nobody is getting close to the metro area, and neither are we, but that's what we're shooting for. 2014, you'll notice it went down a fair amount. That's mostly, it's not because people aren't participating in recycling. It's mostly because people are switching away from newspapers, they're switching away from magazines, they're not getting a whole lot of catalogs because they're shopping online. That's mostly a factor of we don't have very much paper, or at least we don't have as much paper in the waste stream anymore, in the recycling stream, as we used to. It's also a reflection of, I've noticed, at least in my household, mayonnaise, ketchup, other products like that are not getting packaged anymore in glass containers. They're getting packaged in plastic containers, which weigh a lot less. This measurement is done as a factor of volume, meaning tons, meaning weight. So it's a measure of the total amount by weight,
weight, not volume.
Weight. There you go. So the point is, if you have less stuff going into recycling that weighs a lot, it's going to look, when you do the math, it's going to look like
you have to also consider the fact that the total number then from that light weighting should also be going down. And if the total generation number is not going down, that means that we're making up for waste generation elsewhere.
So what would you say about going from 50 to 43%?
7% in 1 year. There's more going on in light weighting in paper, for sure.
Okay.
There's a two credits that we offer.
Yeah.
Yard waste and source reduction, which make up about 6%.
Yeah, but
So we stopped doing that 2 years ago?
yeah, so we stopped a couple of years ago, but what he's referring to is that there was a source reduction credit and a yard waste credit that just got added on to the recycling rate as part of reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's true that we're not measuring it exactly the same as we had in the past. So that's one component of it. But the other thing in 2014, the yard waste that was collected, if that was measured, that was included in the organics number. So a lot of our organic recycling appeared to jump a large amount, even though a lot of that was yard waste that had already been being managed as yard waste.
Right.
But the measurement was different. So
We're shifting it from one column to the other.
Right.
The other thing that may be going on here too is that as we recovered from the recession, the amount of garbage produced increased.
Right.
And
People had more
exactly
disposable
what we're
income.
saying, as a percentage, more garbage is being produced, but the recycling, people are recycling not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So those numbers.
Let's go with that.
yeah, well, the personal consumption expenditure piece that we also look at, explore some of those things like fewer CDs being purchased because people buy music electronically,
Right.
all those
Right.
types of things. So there's a lot of factors, absolutely.
A lot of stuff going on.
So and this is specifically Dakota County, there is still a fair amount of flux in the system. So let's talk for a minute about what we wanted to be able to do. We know that the PCA provides lots of money to, as I explained earlier, to counties across the state for, they're called various things in different places, but essentially it's to, at the level at which people live, to get them to recycle. In Dakota County in 2014, we distributed about $400,000, mostly state funds, a little bit were Dakota County funds, to, I believe we have 11 major cities and a bunch of townships. In our county, all the cities act independently except for 3 of the bigger ones who formed a partnership. And the townships are all together in one partnership. So in effect, we have something like 11 or 12 organizations that get that split that pot of $400,000. The formula that we use to split that up is primarily population-based, and so our environmental resources staff said, well, maybe there's a better way to split up the pot, and we would like to be able to split it up according to who is more effective at spending the money, meaning who's doing better at getting people to recycle. And obviously one of the ways that you would hope to be able to take a look at that question is, let's look at the data. So, because what we want to do is figure out what's working in the cities and then replicate it in other parts of the county, if possible. But you need good city level data in order to be able to do that. So here's how the system works. Hauler A goes through a neighborhood and collects recycling. And he's got the other half of his county picking up trash. And then Hauler B goes through the same neighborhood, picks up a bunch of recycling and trash. So eventually their truck fills up. They go different places to dump the load, which gets weighed. The recycling goes to a facility that is intended to take in recycling stuff and separate it. The trash goes someplace else. But in both cases, what's on the truck gets weighed because very few operators, we have 21 or 22 waste haulers in Dakota County. None of them have a majority of any city except for 2 cities that are single hauler cities, and we'll talk more about that in a little while. So everybody has a mixture. In most of the suburbs in Dakota County, there are between 3 and 8 or 9 companies that are picking up trash and recycling. So they don't ever go dump the load until the truck is full, naturally. It would be a bad business practice to do that. They lose a lot of money, or it would cost all of us a lot more money. So they cross city lines, then they go to the place where they're dumping it, and they get a weight ticket, so we know how many tons are on the truck. And then there's a question, how much of this came from Burnsville and how much of this came from Egan? And the truck driver says, well, I'd say about 60% here and about 40% here. But there are a lot of it. It's essentially a system of guesswork, basically. So at the county level, we don't care about that so much because we got to keep track of what happens in the county. And both Egan and Burnsville in this example are in Dakota County, so we don't particularly care about that. But for the purposes of our project, it was very difficult in order to draw cause and effect. If you can't assign specific outcomes with data, then you're kind of stuck. This is just the Office of Legislative Auditor also looked at data across the state. They did a program evaluation of the recycling system, and at about a little after we came to our conclusions, they came to theirs, and they essentially said the same thing. So I've talked about this a little bit, but cities and counties have tools that they can use in order to try to improve the data that's being collected. Until recently, it hasn't been so much of a big deal. It's getting to be more and more a big deal when you add in businesses and the ratcheting up of requirements to recycle more of the trash, and the fact that food waste, capturing it somehow, recycling it somehow, reusing it is becoming more and more of a big deal because it helps everybody to get to that higher goal that has been set. So when data gets reported to the PCA in terms of what's been collected, it's a little bit of guesswork, and this is kind of the frustration that we ran into. It seemed to us, and of course people in the industry say, are you crazy, lady? You know how hard that would be? It seemed to us that if you could do a waste sort every now and then of the trash, you would have a better idea, as long as you were looking at trash from the same community, you could get a better idea of what's getting recycled, or I mean what's getting thrown out that ought to be recycled, so that you'd have a better sense of who's doing well and go after those who are not so much. But yeah, it gets a little complicated. So another way that the data gets skewed is that weight ticket that comes in. Oftentimes it gets divided by the number of customers on a route, which is very different sometimes than the number of bins that got set out. So if somebody goes on vacation, their bin's not out there. They don't have much recycling, their bin's not out there. But that becomes a problem when you're trying to calculate at a city level, trying to look at who's doing a pretty good job of it and who's not. Another thing, we did a bunch of best practices work in our project and talked to lots of places that are known for having really high recycling rates elsewhere to find out what they do. Those that are in southern climates have access to, well, we do too, but it just doesn't work very well, an RFID technology that helps to tie a bin number to specific weight that goes on the truck arm into the truck. But we've been told by haulers in Minnesota that when they've tried that, it doesn't work because it doesn't work around cold weather, which means, you know, 50% of our year, it's not of much use. That doesn't help much. So absent data, we said, okay, well, we'll do a survey then. We want to figure out, we'll kind of come at it from a different point of view. Let's figure out what the attitudes are about recycling, and knowing that we're going to have to start doing a lot more work with organics, figure out what the attitude is about food waste. The Dakota County Board of Commissioners, thankfully, have a long history of doing a really, I shouldn't say good because I've been running it for several years, but they do a thorough, shall we say, residential survey that essentially is a customer satisfaction thing across a broad range of everything that the Dakota County does every couple of years. So we decided that we would do a mini survey, not in the sense that it's tiny paper or that it is a very short survey, but in the sense that it was only 3 topics. We did park services, we did recycling, and then we looked a little bit at transit. So we did that last fall, a year ago, had about a 34% response rate. And what we found when we looked at the recycling data was interesting to me. 2/3 of the people said at least every once in a while they have more recyclables than will fit in their bin, because remember I told you all but 2 haulers only come every 2 weeks, not once a week. But about 1/3 of people said that never happens to them. More than 1/3 of people said when they have too much stuff to put in the recycling bin, they tend to put it in their trash bin. This seems like a problem that could get resolved. Respondents to our survey said they'd be more likely to recycle, or they'd recycle more materials if they knew what they were supposed to recycle and what they weren't, if recycling got picked up weekly instead of every other week, if they could be assured that haulers actually recycle materials after they're picked up. That's 57% of people mentioned that. Now, this is from a list in a survey, so they're not making it up. This is not an open-ended question. But the reason we put that in there is because our environmental resources people said, you know, there's this urban myth out there that trucks come through the neighborhood, they go to all this effort to pick up recycling, and then it just ends up in a landfill. I said, are you kidding me? So we thought, let's find out about that. Turns out there are a lot of people who think that's true. And 2/3 of people said they did not want an additional bin just for recycling. So we know that organics and food waste is one more area that we really need to
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yeah.
The bin question. Do you happen to know what percentage in Dakota County have carts versus bins? Because when we talk about bins, we're typically talking about the totes that you have to carry out to the curb versus like the 96-gallon cart is a big cart like your garbage can. You know?
I don't think, in our case, what this meant was, when we say bin, we mean cart. But we chose not to use the word cart because people don't know necessarily what that means. And we thought that they did know what.
Haulers in Dakota County use the big
Yes,
carts.
because they're single sort.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even some of the single sort programs, I don't think are all single sort in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Right.
That's because that's a new transition.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our county, they're all using one big, what you would call a cart.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit in our intro to the question about we're not going to educate people in a survey, but we needed them to understand what we were trying to get at. So we used a sentence or two to explain essentially your food waste could be recycled as well or composted, and tell us a little bit how you feel about that. Well, 82% of people said essentially they didn't say make someone else do it, but the option on the survey was, you know, let's go after businesses and institutions and places where lots of people gather and generate recyclables. So my interpretation of that is, as long as somebody else does it, they think that's a great idea. 61% said there ought to be more people doing backyard composting if they live in a single-family home and they're able to do that. 55% said all residences should collect food waste in a separate bin. But remember, in our previous question that I just showed you, a whole bunch of people said, 2/3 of people said we don't want another bin. So then we thought, well, it's going to take a while to get any kind of organic system organized and in place, particularly since you're dealing with haulers who are in the private sector. So we thought if we wanted to start some sort of a program that involved people collecting their food waste at home, just like they do with household hazardous waste, and then they drive it somewhere to get rid of it, would they be willing to do that? And essentially what we found was, if it's 2 miles or less, probably not. If it's more than 2 miles, almost no way. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, so it seemed to us that, and I think our environmental resources staff are totally on board with this too, that single hauler systems, as the professor pointed out, are an answer to a lot of problems in this system. For one thing, you can get good data, which I care about. Nobody else on the face of the earth does. We do. You do. But the other thing is, there's a little bit of a physical safety issue with little kids, especially in the summertime, running around in the city, in the streets, and all the haulers going on the same pathway. The city engineer in Egan would tell you, and probably in any other suburban community would tell you, that having all those heavy trucks on the roads every day of the week, pounds on roads, means they have to do a lot more maintenance. It would be a lot less air pollution. It would mean a lot less gas. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to do that. The problem is, if you try to get city council members interested in making that change and it becoming a top-down thing, every hauler in the land is going to cry bloody murder, and they won't like that. So if that were a system that we would maybe think about trying to encourage haulers, probably, it's easier to get them to voluntarily do it, to do in our county, what would people think about that? And again, we weren't trying to educate them, but we were trying to get a sense of, do they see any advantages to this or not? And the results I thought were really interesting. A single hauler system, to the people who did our survey, they don't think about this in terms of the environment. They don't think, I mean, who thinks about the data? They don't think about it in terms of other advantages. To them, it's still a pocketbook issue, which is an interesting finding because it tells us what we have to work on now. To the people who did our survey, the least important reasons to move towards single hauler systems are the ones that are over there on the right-hand side of the slide. They were about evenly split when we asked them, is it important to have a wide open competition, or is it okay to narrow it down? We got about a 50-50, I think it was 47 to 47% that didn't care or didn't know response. And I was very interested to see the city of Edina did a very similar question when they did their general residential survey earlier this year. The results were released last week. And I called their communications director and asked her to send me their report, which she was kind enough to do. And they asked that question, and they had almost exactly the same sort of ambivalence that we found when we did our countywide survey. So for what it's worth, that was the result of our survey. And that takes us to the end of the presentation. Are there questions?
I'm thinking about it mostly based on that last slide, but do you know, you said you got 34% response rate in your survey, how the responses varied by city, like what percentage? Yeah. Do you get equal distribution? We asked the demographic question, which obviously aren't here. Right. We divided the county up into
actually pretty similar. We divided the county up into major cities and then put a couple of the smaller ones together, and then we had a different category for rural Dakota County. So we can do that cross-tabbing. I don't remember if we looked at, if we ran that particular cross-tab, but we could. We could definitely find out if there are differences by city. Yes?
Your question about weight sorts and the composition comes up a lot. We actually did a 5,200 pound sample weight sort last year from Washington County. And that's great for a point in time piece of data, but this performance level data from a daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly, and it's really important. And one of the ideas out there is to just have haulers weigh recycling containers and garbage containers, sampling some percentage from their route at some point in the year.
Right.
They don't have to sort it, they don't have to do much of anything other than what they're already doing, it's just weigh the total weight of each container. And that would give you a really
How do they do that?
Well, they have to have a scale, you have to have someone following them and then tear off the container.
Yeah.
It could be done fairly efficiently. And then you could do the composition on a regional or a station or something, and that would probably give you better data that's ever been collected anywhere. And I'm plugging this concept. It's my own. So a lot of people have, I think that's likely what will eventually end up happening at some point in time. We're struggling in Washington County for state in performance-based. And the other thing is, all the recycling goes to the MERV, and you get these MERV averages. So, from an individual city perspective, performance data,
it's all much together.
Have it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
we had conversations with you. You're from Washington County?
Yeah.
We had conversations with your staff when we were putting together the questions, because our staff works really well with them, and we knew that they were having some of the same issues and same questions. And, so they were really helpful. Although they don't have any better data than we do. But hopefully soon they will. Okay, I think we're done.
We're out of time.
Right? Thanks, everybody.
I don't know. I know we kind of ran up right against time, so I don't, if Dr. Baker or Jane, if you are willing to stay a few minutes afterwards, if people have other questions, and that. Otherwise, the presentation is recorded online, and you can listen to the audio version on the TCRG website. There is going to be no meeting in October due to the public policy conference. There's a conflict there, but we will be. Our next meeting is in November, and it will be on employment disparities and workforce development program, November 12th. So thank you, everybody. Again. Yeah. Thank you for that. Is. So my husband's with me. Okay. I wrote that. Oh yeah, right.